Y'all hear the music. We are back. The Good Word with Goodwill here on Yahoo Sports. We are part of the Ball Don't Lie Network. We have been on a little bit of a break after Summer League, and we were all exhausted and ready for the NBA season to end. But today, I had to bring on somebody who's probably less than 10 miles away from me, if we're going to be perfectly honest. He is one of the best writers covering the NBA. He is literally not the son of James Buddha Edwards. He is the pride of Flint and Michigan State, the one and only James Edwards III, the beat writer for The Athletic for the Detroit Pistons. James, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well, my brother. I appreciate the intro. I was gonna actually lead with the sappiness. You beat me, but in this ego-filled business, for whatever reason we are in, I want to say thank you for your brotherhood and your friendship. I was trying to think the other day, like when did me and Vinny become close? And I couldn't even remember.
That's a great question.
I just feel like it's just natural. And I'm sure it was when I took the job at some point early on, but I cannot pinpoint.
Yeah, because we never crossed paths. People who don't know, we never crossed paths as actual beat writers.
No, you're a little bit older than me. I grew up reading your stuff.
Now you're making me feel old.
No, in high school and college. You're not much older than me. You're a little bit older than me. And no, man, I appreciate the brotherhood. And I want to say on a professional level, and I tell you this personally, but I want to give you your flowers publicly, because for some reason we don't do that in this business. You are a standalone in the space that you're in and have one of the best voices covering the league. And there's just nobody that does what you do. So I tell you that all the time privately, but I wanted to say it publicly. So thank you for having me on. And now with that said, are you ready to admit Flint is a better basketball city than Detroit?
Why would I ever lie to why would I ever lie to the base? Why would I ever lie? I would never lie.
If I threw out, let's do it like Pokemon. If I threw out Glenn Rice, who are you throwing out? C. Webb?
Probably throwing out Chris Webber.
Does that count though?
Why doesn't it count? He grew up on 6 Mile.
That's fine. Where'd he go to high school?
It doesn't matter. He grew up on 6 Mile.
You are Mr. Detroit.
Yes, I grew up in Detroit. I no longer live in Detroit, but I am Detroit.
All right. Who are you putting up against the Flintstones?
I mean,
won a national title
here.
Won a national title.
Good for y'all. Good for y'all. If Kenyon Martin doesn't break his leg, it's a different story.
No,
y'all won a national title. Big whoop. Nobody remembers that actual team besides people from Flint. People can name the Fab Five. They can name them. They're like New Edition. Ricky, Ronnie, Bobby, Mike, Johnny. Like, you can name the entire Fab Five without breaking a sweat. You go, Mateen Cleaves. All right, cool. Mo P. All right.
Charlie Bell. Yeah, come on. Don't be disrespectful.
Yeah, I get it. But
that actually irks me. That actually irks me more than I let on, that the Flintstones don't get any. And I understand the Fab Five relevance, the shorts, the Black Sox, all that's cute.
The wins. Don't discount the wins.
I don't see any banners.
You don't got to have banners to have. Look, only one team win every year.
Right. And one team won. And they're called the Flintstones.
And no team ever got embarrassed in a national semifinal game the way that Michigan State got embarrassed the next year when Richard Jefferson blocked Jason Richardson at the rim, and Jason Richardson, God bless him, was not to be heard from for the rest of the evening.
No, that's a fact. That's a fact. I actually want to go back and watch that game. I was young when that happened. I want to go back and watch that. But I will give Detroit this. Your top three is probably Webb, our good friend Smitty.
Smitty
and Jay Rose.
Or Derek Coleman.
And Derek Coleman. You guys got to probably stronger. But then ours is weird because you have to factor in Deanna Nolan, right? The McGee sisters.
Yeah, that's fine.
Currently, we're watching you guys currently.
Oh, yes, the great Kyle Kuzma.
Okay,
and also Monte Morris. No. You guys got some players now, but historically, it's not a contest. It's funny.
I'm glad you left. You know whose name out?
Yeah.
Who's probably the best of all three of those? But yeah,
we don't have to go there.
Okay.
But normally, us in Detroit, when we're thinking about our inner city competition, we're thinking of New York, we're thinking of Chicago, we're thinking of all those other places. Flynn is like, nice little brother.
I
But
knew
not
that
that
was
you could
coming.
ever relate.
I knew
Not that
that was
James
coming.
Edwards III, Michigan State alum, could ever relate to being called a little brother. It couldn't happen. And maybe me and James will wind up betting on an October 21st contest between two schools that had a night game in East Lansing.
Will your
Hopefully,
coach?
no
Will
felonies
you guys
will
have
be
your
involved.
coach?
He will be back by then.
Oh, okay.
He'll
Once
be
you
back
guys
by
are done
then.
playing Bermuda Triangle University in the first 4 weeks,
Hey, the schedule is the schedule.
they can pick the schedule.
The schedule. Hey, speaking of which, just as not even as a segue, but speaking of which, because I am a basketball weirdo, I had a dream last night about the schedule release
for the league.
Yes,
the association.
Which let me know it is time for a break. It is time for a vacation. If I'm dreaming about a schedule release when it's supposed to be like the first week of August, the first full week, so I don't think it'll be next week. I think it'll be the week after. But anyway, James, to get to the NBA before we make our official Michigan State bet, I feel like you still owe me from last year's bet, but I'm gonna let you live on that.
I'll look it up.
Yeah, you look it up. Go ahead, look it up. But first off, largest contract in NBA history belonging to Jaylen Brown. 5 years, $304 million extension that seemed like a foregone conclusion even after his disastrous Eastern Conference Finals where he couldn't hit a three, he couldn't dribble. But Jaylen Brown, this is going to be par for the course. This is not NFL running backs. This is more like NFL quarterbacks, except it's like 60 of these dudes where they're going to get the big money. It's fully guaranteed, $70 million in this final season. It feels, James, bigger than what it actually is because of the way that the cap is going to rise. But do you think this was I won't say do you think it was a smart investment, but do you think this was a no-brainer as much as I thought it was?
Yeah, it had to happen, right? Like, I'm higher on Jaylen Brown than the consensus seems to be right now. Like, me and you specifically have had how many conversations over the years where we go back and forth between Tatum and Brown? Yeah, I think we both settle now on my light-skinned brother. It's clear, but it certainly is like a no-brainer.
Don't act like I was carrying the pom-poms.
No,
I just wasn't sure.
No, I'm saying we both are. I was saying Jaylen for a little bit too.
Yeah.
No, you weren't. No, you weren't carrying the pom-poms. No, I think it's a no-brainer in the sense that, look at it like this. Aside from the cap situation, right? Like, everybody was referencing the Mike Conley when he was the highest paid player at $150 million. Like, that's just the first of what's to come, right? Like, it's just setting the table. It's not that big a deal. I agree that we need to start looking at the cap in terms of percentages and not dollar amounts, which Mike Vorkanoff at The Athletic wrote a great piece on that. But on top of that, Boston had to ask itself a couple questions, right? If you trade Jaylen, what are the odds you get things back in return that help you get back or to or beyond where they have been, right? Like, we're sitting here talking about Boston like they're a failure,
right?
Which annoys me. Like, Tatum and Brown aren't even 27, and they've been to how many Eastern Conference Finals? Like, they're a success, no matter how you want to slice it. I'm not rings guy. I think in the NBA, if you can have a team that's in the hunt every year, that's a success. And Boston is in the hunt every year. And 1 year, they're going to get over the hump. They are. They're just too good. It's just how it works. They're going to have health in their favor. It's just going to work that way. What I will say is Boston had to weigh, are the odds we get something back in a Jaylen Brown return, which any team trading for him, it could have just been a 1 year rental, higher than our chances of winning a title if we sign Jaylen Brown? And the answer to me is no. I don't think the return you would get for Jaylen Brown with 1 year left on his deal, if he's not agreeing to resign, makes you any better than just keeping one of the best, what do we want to say, 20 players, 20, I mean, I'll say 20 just to be safe, 20 players in the NBA.
Yeah, I mean, and like you said, I think the important point to remember is getting to the Eastern Conference Finals 5 times in the last 7 years is no small feat. Going to the NBA Finals, granted, I think, James, the way that they've lost a couple of series has left a bad taste in people's mouths.
That's
last year, a couple months ago, losing the way that they lost in the Game 7 at the crib after you fight back to force a Game 7, losing in the finals after going up 2-1 and looking like by far the better team against Golden State. Like, those are the type of losses that stick in your craw. But when you think of, two-way wings, 25 years old, and everything that the Celtics went through last year, like we talk a lot about the resilience of different franchises and everything else, but the Celtics had a lot of turmoil just to begin the season, and for them to regroup, for Jason Tatum to basically look like an MVP for a huge chunk of the season, and Jaylen Brown to settle in as a number two. It ain't easy being number two. You know what I mean?
Especially when you think you can be number one.
Especially when you're young. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard for James Harden to be number two, and he's clearly on the downside of his career, but that shadow that is cast by Joel Embiid is clearly a lot for him. For Jaylen Brown, who I thought for a long time felt like he was the best player on this team, but for him to at least in some way accept that Jason Tatum is that dude, and then to be rewarded, but like let's slow down and say, it ain't that hard to accept $304 million. You know what I mean? Like, no matter how you feeling, you know what I mean? That's literally like having your woman, you being mad at your woman, right? And then all of a sudden your woman is Sanaa Lathan. You know, or your woman is Nia Long, 1997. You know what I mean? In her Love Jones prime. You're going to say no?
Not 2021 Nia Long?
Well, considering certain things, I'm simply backing it up before there was an NBA connection. You know what I mean? I'm making it a bit more safe, a little more PG-13. But that sort of thing. You're not going to turn down, your woman if she comes and apologizes to you and says, you know what, I was wrong. As an aside, there is nothing more gratifying than to hear a woman say, I'm sorry.
Oh man, I heard that recently.
Did you? Did you frame it? Did you frame it?
I didn't frame it. I took a video though.
Good. I'm glad you did. We will celebrate. We will pop a toast over this at a later date and not here over this podcast and over this Zoom. But yeah, to that point. So, but I think when you look at the landscape of the Eastern Conference, and you said it, James, Boston is always going to be in the mix. They're not in turmoil like the Philadelphia 76ers. They don't have the perpetual Giannis question hanging over their head like the Milwaukee Bucks. They're not the little engines that can, maybe, in the New York Knicks. And they don't have the Damian Lillard question hanging over their heads either like the Miami Heat. They are poised to be a consistent presence for the next at least 2 or 3 years. Like, I don't think you can plan beyond 18 months in the NBA because the league moves so fast. But I feel like they're poised, especially with Porzingis, to be in the hunt, and that's all you can ask for.
And I want to add to that too, because I don't really see this talked about a lot. I think Brown and Tatum play off each other well. Like, it's not like a situation to me where it's like, aside from everybody in the league wants elite 6'7" to 6'9" wings, and they have probably the best tandem that me and you can name in quite some time in that regard, which is another reason why you shouldn't trade one of them, especially at their age. I just think they play well off each other. Obviously, they haven't gotten to the pinnacle and won, but I don't think it's like nobody's ever questioned the fit. People have just questioned whether or not it's worth having both that are similar in size and skill set and things like that, right? Like,
I think positional duplication.
Right, and that's all it is. But I think they both take a good job of taking the back seat when the other one's cooking. Like, it's not like a Harden situation where you have to like screw the roster or
no.
It actually fits really well, and I think they enjoy playing with each other. And I don't know, I don't ever want them to break up. Like, I hope the Denver Nuggets are the template, and I hope a lot of NBA teams learned from the Nuggets' success to just like, I just hope we enter an era of staying patient. I know it's probably not going to happen, but if you stay patient, man, like, I think fans connect to the team more when there's not a bunch of names going back and forth. I think it's better for the league. Rivalries can build.
Yeah.
But even more than that, man, you just see it through, right? And like, that's why I love Denver winning the title. I mean, Malone would have been fired by 29 other teams after year 3 or 4. And this was year 8 in Denver for him?
7. I think it was 7.
7? Like, we need more of that. And I hope Boston does that. I really do.
It's an for the NBA, it's an existential question. It is, do you want to win November to April, or do you want to win June and July?
Mm-hmm.
And for a long time, the NBA, and to this day, the NBA wants to be the 24/7 league. They are chasing the gold mine that is the NFL. They want to lead Sports Center. They want to lead First Take, all the speculation. They want to win in social media. I'm not sure how much of an intrinsic value that is for the NBA, but you can't say that with the direction they've gone as far as the transactional stuff, the rumor mill, the player beefs, the player podcast, all that stuff. But I'm with you. I think continuity creates familiarity. I
Mm-hmm.
think familiarity creates competitive contempt from teams, from one team to the next. And I do think that's a little bit that's missing. And that's why they're trying to gin up this in-season tournament, which is more money, more money, more money, while also trying to tell its players, hey, we guys need you to play a little bit harder in November and December. You guys are fine from February on. After the All-Star break, you saw, with the exception of a few teams, including the team in our market, you saw every team going for it, whether it's to solidify playoff position, James, or whether to get into the playoffs or fight to the play-in. Like, there was a really compelling last 2 months of the regular season. I didn't think an in-season tournament was necessarily needed, but to your point, the continuity certainly helps all of those things there. But do you want to win November, or do you want to win July?
Right. Nope. I think that's a great point. And to your point, I think this past season, obviously it's hard to put on your fan hat when you're in it and working, but I enjoyed this past season more than any season in quite some time. Personally, I love the parity. I love the two teams in the finals. It was the best team in the regular season versus the hottest team in the playoffs. I just thought it worked. Every angle worked out well. I hope the league sees that. I hope teams see that, and see how important culture is, because I think the two teams that were left standing have two of the strongest cultures there are in professional basketball. Maybe professional sports, but certainly professional basketball.
Yeah, it's a lot. It is. I like Denver's story. I put it like this. I don't think every team should stand pat. Like, some
No.
teams sit with executives or sit with players too long and try to stay in that relationship a little bit too longer than they should before moving on, because nobody wants to admit that they're wrong, or wants to admit that, hey, somebody else is right. But I get your point about, like you said, the continuity of Denver, and Denver had to wait on Porter and Murray to get better. So it wasn't like they were being patient for the sake of being patient. They had a generational player who was holding things afloat while you get your guys, your 23, 24-year-old guys, back healthy and on the floor. Not every team in franchise has that.
Right. No, that's fair.
And we're going to talk about a little bit about another quote unquote patient franchise. If you guys if you guys didn't get the drift already from James being the athletic beat writer for the Detroit Pistons and me being a Detroiter, we're going to talk some Pistons. But very quickly, of course, we have to talk about, at least mention, like, I don't even know how comfortable it is to talk about the situation with Bronny James, who underwent cardiac arrest on Monday. It came out yesterday, freshman to be at USC, and he's now out of ICU. And the only thing that strikes to me, James, that I feel like that we can responsibly talk about here is, man, this guy's 18 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the thing that strikes me most, is that, A, we've been watching this kid for so long, you forget that he's 18. You know what I mean? Like, we didn't see it the way that we saw DeMar Hamlin, on Monday Night Football, and we have that image seared in our minds. All we have with Bronny is the thought of, man, Len Bias or Reggie Lewis or whomever. Like, USC had a player last year who underwent something similar, and through the quick reactions of the medical staff and getting him to the hospital, he was
Christian
fine.
Eriksen. I'm a big soccer fan. You remember the soccer player during the World Cup that collapsed on the field? Yeah.
So just, James, like, we're relatively old, right? But 18 is really, really young. And that was the thing that struck out to me on this, was not necessarily about his basketball career, but just, it took me back to where you might have been moments when you heard of instances of things happening and you're like, oh my God, this is, the phrase bigger than basketball, but just, we've always thought of Bronny, one and done, fast track to the league, going to play with his dad. The kid is 18 years old. Like, that's the thing that strikes out to me, James.
Yep. No, 100%. And like you said, I don't know what other than prayers up and hope everything's doing okay to the whole family. Is obviously Bronny. But it goes to even like talk about or to think about, you would imagine we've all applauded LeBron for his fitness through 20 years. And you can only imagine how serious that's probably taken in his household and things like that. And obviously Bronny plays basketball all the time and is, I'm imagining, in a phenomenal shape. It just goes to show you just never know what can happen, right? Like, that's life, and it's unfortunate. And yeah, I just hope he can. I just hope he can continue to chase his dream, whatever that is, right? You don't want to see it, pressure aside, whatever that is. You just really hope that this kid who has a dream is able to continue toward it. And this isn't going to block him or barricade him from whatever he's dreamed of since he was yay high. So I think that's it. I think the biggest thing is life is life.
Mm-hmm.
Can't control certain things. And you just hope that this kid can continue to chase his dream, whatever that is.
This makes you recalibrate a lot of things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you see that, and I won't say it's a reset button, but it's certainly something that realigns everything. And we don't know if Bronny will be able to play. We don't know if, luckily, he got out of ICU. The James family issued a statement, thanking everybody involved. So he's out of the woods as far as that is concerned. He's clearly stable. And the fact that it didn't get out for an entire full day speaks to a lot of sensitivity concerning the privacy of the family and respecting the family's wishes. When you're 18 and you've been in this basketball cyclone, this business of basketball for so long, like even Victor Wembanyama, like all these kids now are indoctrinated into the business of basketball at such a young age that it's a chance to slow down if you're able to still come back and play, but it's definitely a chance to slow down and figure out really, what's important. And all the other conversation that people are having, I think sometimes it can be really irresponsible. We're not going to go there. We're going to take a break, and we're going to come back with some Detroit Pistons talk. Yeah, some Pistons talk on this podcast. Welcome back to The Good Word with Goodwill. I'm here with James Edwards from The Athletic. James Edwards III, mind you. James, of course, the Detroit Pistons, the team that you've covered. Like, you've covered the Pistons longer than I have. Really? I was only a beat writer there for like 6 years. I think
I just finished 6. I just finished 6. Yeah.
Neither one of us, or you're the only person to have covered a winning season out of the both of us.
Well,
yes.
They were 41-41.
That's 500.
It's not a winning. It's not a losing. All right, I'll give you that. But yes, you aside from the bad basketball you watched, you had to deal with a lot more headaches. I'm blessed that while the winning hasn't been there, they've drafted and acquired great human beings that have makes the day by day easy to get by.
You like trip on like the day to day. Like, those dudes were fun to cover. The Curious George Pistons, like, what were these guys going to get into next? Like, that was fun to come into work every day and figure out who's going to skip practice today, who's going to cuss out the coach today. Like, that stuff was actually, if there's any way to be indoctrinated into being a beat writer, you're better off covering a really, really bad team than covering a really good one. And I covered the bad news bears of Detroit Pistons basketball. And not even no need to go through it, but they haven't won a playoff game since May 25th, 2008.
Yeah, it's a weird situation, right? Because we're very familiar and know how historic of an organization it is, right? And I think we both make that clear in our writing, and just to remind our younger readers, like, this is one of the 8 teams at the entire NBA that have more than 2 titles. But there is a young audience that has not seen them win a playoff game. There's a young audience that doesn't remember them winning a playoff game. There are fans from outside that are young that only know the Pistons as kind of a bottom feeder. So I mean, and
It's
I'm
been
sure
basically what you're saying is it's been too long.
it's been a while. But I will say this, and I think we both agree are in alignment with this. The way that they're building it now is the right way to build it. The losses, obviously, fans are upset, and they compound what happened the last 10 years before Troy got there. And when I say Troy Weaver, the GM, they compound all of that because they haven't seen winning. But those before Troy and Ed Stefanski is the one that kicked it off, trading Andre Drummond and really opening up the pathway to rebuild. Before those two, this was a basketball team that was bad at trying to win, right? You can't blame.
Nobody felt like you could afford to really rebuild,
right?
In Detroit, and it was just a different. It was a completely different time, especially when you consider the salary cap wasn't spiking, the talent was coming in, but the league was changing, so it was really hard to get in front of. And I think that's what you saw with Stan Van Gundy. That's probably what you saw at the end of Joe Dumars' tenure when he kept trying to figure out ways to blend the vets with some of the younger guys without completely bottoming out. And it just didn't work because the league was changing. They were playing big when the rest of the league was going small. Mm-hmm. And with Stan Van Gundy, he kept trying to not necessarily swing big, but it was the Reggie Jackson trade, which worked. It was the Blake Griffin trade, which in theory worked after Stan left, but it had a pretty big, it's
the reason they are where they are now.
Yes, it's a huge thing. So now you fast forward. Troy Weaver takes over with a huge scouting background. Dwayne Casey, who had to wear all of those losses from the start of this rebuild for the last 3 years. He had to wear all of those losses after winning Coach of the Year in Toronto and then being fired there. Like, he could have sat out, waited a year, and then gotten one of these high-paying, cushy jobs. Instead, he took this job, had to wear the losses, did not know he was signing up for a rebuild, but that's exactly what happened. And now you
champion the rebuild, too. I don't think people know that. Yeah. Like, after he did his job, which was he was supposed to get there to win. He took the team 41-41. We saw the best version of Blake Griffin we ever saw.
Yep.
But then he was also the one going to ownership saying, like, I know this will suck for me, but you have to do this. So just to your point, I don't know if that's out. Like, it's not like, I don't think it was tough on Dwayne, but he also had the bigger picture of the organization in mind, which I think is something that fans should know and want to know.
It's a huge sacrifice for a guy like who this isn't your hometown. You know what I mean? There's no emotional tie or connection to the franchise until you actually get here. And looking at it and saying, this is what we have, and this ain't going to be good enough to get to where this franchise deserves. So you're going to have to tear it down, and it's going to have to be ugly. And it's in the middle of the middle of the pandemic, in the start of the pandemic, when you didn't know what the league was going to look like. You couldn't have fans in the seats. You go through numerous front office changes, and now you bring in Monty Williams, who signed a contract that NFL running backs are jealous of. You know what I mean? Like, it's coming in from Phoenix, where he helmed a lot of veteran teams. Mm-hmm. And Monty, who I've always really liked, now he has, Isaiah Stewart on an extension. You got Joe Harris on an expiring. You got Bojan Bogdanovic on his last year of
essentially expiring. Yeah,
essentially expiring. So you got a couple of vets, but really the strength of this team, or where this team is going to rise and fall, is with Cade Cunningham. Yep. Is he going to be completely healthy? He's going to the USA Basketball Select Team in Vegas to help the guys to compete with the guys for the World Cup. I think that is a huge thing. Jaden Ivey, also the same age. Asur Thompson, I really like him.
I do too.
I really like Asur Thompson. I think he's not only mature, James, but I think he just makes really good basketball plays.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, just the core of this young team, like, not necessarily projections.
Jalen Duren too. Yeah.
Jalen Duren is
I know you're a big fan
monster.
of JD. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. But this is where Troy Weaver has this is where he made his bones, and this is where he is riding this rebuild on, is all of those guys maturing and developing at the same time, starting with Cade.
Yep. No, you made a great point. And I think and I just want to close the last point I made. I think the way they are building it now is the way that they should have been. They weren't rebuilding before Troy. They were just bad at winning. They were trying to stay relevant and trying to stay, and it didn't work. And that's the worst place you can be. They tore it down, and I know it's been tough for Pistons fans, but I don't think they realize how lucky they are that within 2 years of tearing it down and completely rebuilding, they landed number one. That doesn't happen. And, I think Cade is going to be a really, really, really good player. He just has to play and show it. Ivy, my thoughts on him coming into the year, his rookie year, just completely, we've talked about all the time, completely obliterated everything not everything, but a lot of things I had questions about, just getting better every single month. So you're set at the ball handling position, right? It seems like. And then Jalen Duren, just what he was able to do at his age, and even being able to impact the game without still like really catching up to the pace in which you have to play, or the reaction in which you have to play. Like, that's going to come. Isaiah Stewart, I'm a believer in the three ball. I know some people aren't. I saw enough last year that makes me think that he's going to be fine and be able to play for. And then, Ausar is a guy who, I mean, you always kind of hear, like, when you get these wings that come in, like, oh, he reminds me of Andre Iguodala, and Troy said that, and it's like, then you see Summer League and it's like, oh, like, I see it. Like, I really see it. So
he's a connector.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Connector.
I feel like he's a connector, and it's hard for young guys to come into the league when your number one goal, not even to cut you off, is your number one goal is to get mine. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But he comes in and he makes the right plays. Like, I think that's an incredible quality to have.
Yep, and it's only going to get more noticeable when he's playing next to Cade and Jaden. But we just named all these guys, right? And you've been here. You're from here. I've lived in Michigan my whole life. These are all guys drafted. And this organization is where it's at today primarily because of poor drafting. And if we go down the list of first round picks, even when they were good, we can start with Darko. How many of these guys were out of the league or at the end of a bench that they took in the lottery by the age of 30? The only ones are KCP, and Luke. And this is spanning now over 20 years. That's why the organization needed somebody like Troy. That's why it was important to start from the bottom and build through the draft, because that's how you build a Denver. That's how you build a Toronto. That's how you build a Miami. That's how you build sustainability, drafting. And it's not there yet. Like we said, Cade's the wild card. I think we both believe he could get to a point where he's a top 15, 10 player in this league. I think the skills are there to do so. The desire is there to do so. He just has to do it, right? But I think that's the biggest shift and the biggest difference between where they are now, even with the losses, and where they were just 7 to 15 years ago with all the losses.
Well, I think, and we kind of make this comment amongst ourselves, like when we're at games, and we say that Piston fans have been spoiled because, there's this bad stretch, right? You haven't won a playoff game since 2008. You have had one winning season since then, and you got swept out in the last 2 times you made the playoffs. But over the course of a lifetime, over the course of my lifetime, you've gone to the conference finals 10 plus times.
Yep.
You've gone to the NBA finals 5 times. You've won 3 championships. You've had transcendent players that have connected themselves with the city, that have become a part of the fabric of not just the franchise, but the city. And then there's the expectation, hey, do it again. And
if you're 35 to 40, sorry to cut you off. If you're 35 to 40, and I just missed the bad boys. I was born in 92. But I'm a sicko like you, and I understand. But if you're 35 to 40, which isn't old, your frustration probably with the Pistons is high, but it's not what anybody 34 and under has dealt with, right? It's just a little bit different.
Yeah, it is a little bit because your only frame of reference is the go to work Pistons, and because of the whole Darko thing, it's almost like 2004 didn't happen to some people because we could have had Melo, we could have had Wade, we could have had Bosh. Yeah, you got a ring. Right. That's kind of glossed over in the midst of all that. You got a ring, and a lot of teams that draft well don't get
Probably
rings.
Should have had 2.
Probably should have had 2 if not for a Rasheed Wallace brain fart.
Yes.
Could have had 3 if not for a super highway opening in Auburn Hills named LeBron James Drive in 2007.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like it's and I think a lot of those things formulate the frustration for Piston fans back then, because they won in the beginning. Like normally teams, like you brought up Denver, you went through the continuity, you win after years of frustration. That team won really quickly.
Yeah.
That team was not the bad boys. The bad boys had to keep climbing and keep clawing and lose tragically. And then when they won, it was a relief. In 2004, they went to the conference finals in 03 and 04. They won. And you had more on the back end of frustration and why didn't we win in 05, 06, 07, 08, leading to the teardown of 09 and everything that's happened since then. Because of the way that the franchise won quickly compared to the traditional climb, all of those things creates this ball of frustration that is a powder keg now. So when you see Cade Cunningham, and I wanted to get to Cade because it's easy for the league to forget about a guy.
Mm-hmm.
In his second year, he had the stress reaction in his shin. He plowed through it to, play decently enough early in the season. But when you got a guy playing on one leg, that's really, really hard. I think, and I've said this to James, so I'm not bringing this up to him as a surprise.
No.
But the comparisons before were Luka Doncic with Grant Hill. I don't see him being big enough or athletic enough to be one of those guys. Like Grant Hill was a super athlete. Luka Doncic is a tank. And that's not to turn it down, but it's to say, is the comp for Cade Cunningham Shai Gilgeous-Alexander?
I don't know if I would you could use the word comp, but I think that's what you hope.
I'm going to say ceiling. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's what you hope the end goal is. You don't hope, you hope it's better than that, not to discredit Shai. I love Shai. I was telling you top 10 player in the league in December. I was on that.
I thought you were high.
You did. But
I still think you're high, but go ahead.
That's fine. He was top 10 for last season.
Yes.
We're talking about right now the most recent version of Shai we just saw.
Yes.
Which is a borderline top 10 player.
Yes.
Similar attributes between the two. I think Cade's ceiling is still higher.
Okay.
But to expect him to get that is we have to see him play a full season, right?
Yep.
What I will say, though, is for Pistons fans looking for a glimmer of hope and like, are we going to compete? Like, how close are we going to be? Like, it's not out of the realm of possibilities that Cade takes a Shai leap. And I would argue that the team around Cade is better than the team around Shai this past season. There's no Jalen Williams.
Right.
There's no Jalen Williams and Josh Giddey.
Right.
I think those two are, but if you just look at the balance of the Pistons front court washes OKC's front court. And that's not even, I don't think that's they're not like a great front court yet. They're young, but they're better than OKC's. OKC didn't have a Bojan. OKC doesn't have Alec Burks. OKC doesn't have a Amani Morris, right? So it's like, it's not inconceivable to believe that the Pistons could have a turnaround. I think we just both agree it's like, when does Cade get to where we think he gets? And he just had a year off. He's healthy. Talk to him in Vegas. He feels, and first of all, I hope he becomes a star because, as you know, just one of the nicest young men ever. Just gets it, raised well, speaks to you like
he was bred to be
talk.
A star, but in a good way.
Yes, like you can talk to Cade. Like Cade will just small talk with you, win law. Like he's just a great human being. But with that said, he feels like he has a lot to prove. He said that. Like and he's a guy that low key carries an edge with him. He might not show it and verbalize it aggressively, but if you're around him enough, you see it. You talk to him. You've heard him say things that like
he's a very confident. He's a very confident guy, and although
but it's self-aware too.
Yes, and last year ate at him. You know what I mean?
Yes.
You could tell that last year ate at him, that he wasn't able to be around and be able to lead. And I do think that there's something to leading and knowing and being mature enough to lead. Like everybody wants to lead. Guys want to be good enough to lead, but being able to have the maturity to be able to read the room, especially when you're in a locker room full of young guys around the same age as you. It's easy to be leader guy when you're 30. Yep. But if you're going to be leader guy at 21 because this is this is what you've been bred to be. You've been bred to be the number one pick. You've been bred to be a franchise guy. Whether you become that or not is certainly going to be up for debate, and it's going to be the biggest question of whether this Detroit Pistons team elevates itself to some of those other franchises that we've been talking about, the Bostons, the Phillies, the Milwaukees, maybe not the Phillies because
Denver,
the Pistons want to be Philly. One of those elite franchises, right?
Yep.
But I do think that there is not only a maturity, but when I listen to other players talk about him, when I listen to Kevin Durant talk about Cade Cunningham, and hey, for one, I'm not sure if I trust Kevin Durant as team builder, but I do trust Kevin Durant as
basketball
evaluate as basketball guy. And his rookie year, he was singing Cade's praises and basically, saying I've watched him play for years. I've been around him for years. Like, he's legit.
Jokic did, Giannis did.
And there's going to be the question of Cade Cunningham or Evan Mobley. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think it's going to be Cade Cunningham with Scotty Barnes or Cade Cunningham with Jalen Green. I think the question is going to be Cade Cunningham or Evan Mobley. Period. I think that's what it's going to come down to.
I think that's fair, and I also think what we were both just talking about earlier. I think what gave him the nudge at that time was the intangible leadership qualities. Right? You've probably been around Mobley more than me, but quiet guy.
Definitely.
The Pistons needed a leader at that time to start this thing, and it's not we're not making anything up. If you spend more than a day around Cade, you hear how his teammates talk about him, who are his age. Jaden loves him. They all know whose team it is, and that's rare for a team of guys that are all the same age. It's just, I agree. It's probably that, but even then, I think that there's a world where even if you end up saying Mobley over Cade, if it gets to that point, I still think there's a world where the Pistons get to where they want to go with that outcome of if people consider Mobley over Cade, right? Because I think they're both going to be ridiculously good.
Yeah, if you take Mobley over Cade, it's because you think Mobley is Tim Duncan,
right?
You know what I mean? And that's no
Cade's
shade.
But then my comp for Cade is the guard wing Tim Duncan. The way
is there such thing?
The way he plays, it's very fundamental, right?
Yes.
Cade is a very fundamental player.
Yes.
The way he carries himself, it's like the guard version of Tim Duncan is how I always, once I got around Cade, is I don't know if it makes sense to people, but I mean, I could probably think of a guard that was...
You're saying the steal in which the steadiness and how he projects, he's not going to sway emotionally. The one ejection he got in his rookie year, he dunked on Ian Smith from Phoenix, and I want to say he pointed at the bench, and the referees thought that he was pointing at Ian Smith because it was in his line of sight. He not even the
Jaylen Smith.
I say Ian Smith. Jaylen Smith. That's what it was. Smith from Phoenix.
Jaylen Smith.
You know what I mean? That sort of thing. So there's a still about him. And you brought up Jaden Ivey because I definitely want to get to him before we go. Last year, at the start of last year, I thought he believed the game moved so fast that he had to play faster than the game. That
Agreed.
He was just playing at he was listening to a podcast at 2.5 speed. That's just what it was. He was barely hearing the words.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That sort of thing. And sort of towards All-Star break, you could see him understanding, my speed, I'm already naturally fast. I can get to the bucket here. I can dish off here. You could see the game starting to slow down for him little by little. I don't know if he's a point guard, off guard. I do wonder, if either one of them will be great enough shooters to be able to play off the ball enough to complement the other. But I don't think that either one of them is necessarily a problem. I like Jaden Ivey in his explosiveness and his athleticism mixed with Cade's sort of cerebral operate around you know what I mean?
It's a Ferrari and a Buick Skylark, right? It's an old school.
You calling him a Buick Skylark? Come on,
no,
man.
Just
you do something better than that.
Cade's you go down Woodward, you see a 4-door big body Chevy, just driving slow, turning, not going over curbs, just the swaggy car. You got the hat, the pimp hat on, and then Jaden's the Ferrari, right? That's just how I look at it. It's just two different styles, but we want both cars.
Yeah, you definitely want both cars.
You want both cars.
James probably has both cars.
Don't do that because you don't want to see. Now you're opening a can of worms, but because I love you, I'm gonna stop.
I'm not opening the can of worms. But
stop.
But before we go, because I do want to talk about a little bit about the CBA before we go.
Yeah.
How do you see this whole? Because you just had an article in The Athletic, I think it was either last week or the week before, where you predicted the starting five in a rotation.
Mm-hmm.
For them. How do you see this starting five? Obviously, you're going to have Cade and Jaden Ivey in the backcourt. But when you got Bogdanovich on an expiring, you got Burks on an expiring, you got Joe Harris, who they brought in, basically just taking the Brooklyn salary dump on an expiring, adding three-point shooting if he's to play. How do you see this rotation shaking out? And can they actually make tangible progress with a bunch of babies?
So to answer your first part, I think the starting lineup ends up being Cade, Jaden, Bojan, Isaiah Stewart, and Jalen Duren. I think that's their best, probably most balanced starting five. I know some Pistons fans, again, listening to this, don't believe. For it to work, Stu has to shoot 36% from three, right? At least. And he got 33% last year and only played 50 games. I think he should
be 34. I think 36 makes him like almost above league average. I don't think he has to be above league average.
If he can get, 35. I think he can be 36. Like there was that month he shot 50% the entire month of December. He had one bad stretch in January, but he never shot threes before, right? Like he got in his own head, finally had his first whatever. I don't want to spend too much time. I talk about him enough and I get called a Isaiah Stewart fanboy, but I just believe in guys that can switch positions. And he's the one guy that if you've watched the Pistons since he's gotten there, he's gotten better every single year. It might just be incremental, but you see stuff every single year that you didn't see the year before. So that's why it's hard to put a ceiling on a guy like that, right? So I think that's a starting five. And then I think you don't bring Monty Morris here not to play.
I just think Troy Weaver wanted to bring somebody in that looked like him. They look exactly.
I never even thought about that.
He looks like he could be.
Have
Monty
you told
Morris's
Troy that?
Daddy. I've not told him that. I'm gonna tell him.
Wait, can you wait till I'm there? Because I need to hear his response to that. That's hilarious. I hadn't even thought about that. That's funny. Alec Burks is gonna play.
Yep.
Alec Burks is a great player. Isaiah Livers. Troy has told me on the record. I talked to him in Paris, and he brought up Isaiah Livers as being part of the core, unprompted. I like Isaiah Livers as a 3-and-D wing. He just needs to stay healthy. Another guy they drafted second round. And then it comes down to the front court, right? Asar's going to play. So I think you could play Livers at the 4. Then it comes down to, and everybody makes the center jokes, Wiseman, Bagley. I'm curious to see who emerges out of that. And this is all assuming Bagley and Bojan and Burks and Killian are on the team to start the season, right?
Right.
We're just based on that. But I'm curious to see who emerges out of Bagley and Wiseman. I think the coach will probably go with Bagley when it settles. Just because I think there's just not as much learning curve. You know what you're getting from Bagley, right?
Right.
But I mean, Wiseman has still has basically half the summer left. You just never know. So
speaking of a league moving on from a player, you know what I mean?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Right. And I also, and to answer your second part, I know it's so long-winded. Were the Pistons bad last year? Yes. Were they 17 wins bad? No. They weren't. Cade, but I'm factoring in the roster, right? Cade missed the whole season.
You're saying it's the roster 17 wins.
No,
they were intentionally bad after November because this is what it was. Yeah, you were in the Big Vic sweepstakes.
Right. So when people talk about, I think people have been making the correlation between what Monty built in Phoenix and Detroit, where they were a 19-win team and turned into 34 or 5 his first year.
Short year, the pandemic year.
And people are like, oh, can we do that in Detroit? And it's but then they're 17 to 35. Teams don't have an 18-win jump. And I'm like, agreed. But this is probably if you get 60 games from Cade, and Isaiah Stewart only played 50-ish, Bojan only played 50-ish, they're probably in the mid-20s, right? Yeah, Then you think of it like that, then it's that's not that hard to do to get into the early 30s. And I think we both agree if they get to the early 30s and are in the play-in hunt in the last month of the season or the last 20 days, everybody feels good about what's ahead.
Look, it's hard to tell people that Detroit as a basketball market is a sleeping giant, but that's exactly what it is. Like there's a thirst.
It shouldn't be hard though, because during the early 2000s, didn't they sell out weren't they the number one in attendance 6 years in a row?
But
like it's statistically proven.
People forget quickly, man.
No,
like this
right.
is what
right.
When you've been bad for a long time and long memories only exist in the way of something negative. There's a reason why people believe you've won one playoff game in almost 15 years. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you were the beasts of the East for a long time. You were at the end of every yellow brick road, whether it was for LeBron James or Dwayne Wade or Kevin Garnett. Like, they were the beast that you had to beat. But that's a long time ago. Yeah. And now you're having to rebuild and remake memories. You're not even in Auburn Hills anymore. You're at the Pizza Dome. That is better for hockey and maybe concerts than it is for basketball.
I disagree with that take, but I'll let you get your jokes off.
Thank you. It's my podcast. I'm definitely going to get these jokes off. But no, but I tend to believe that they will be better. Of course, they'll be better than 17 wins. But there is an experience curve that when guys miss games, they have to play.
Yeah.
Like, Cade learned a lot by sitting and watching. Isaiah Stewart learned a lot by sitting and watching, but there's something about going out there and being hit. So going out there and playing and figuring things out, going out there and playing with your teammates. Like, there's going to be more chemistry with a guy like Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren with each other than there will be with Cade and Jalen Duren, or Cade with,
or even Isaiah Alec Burks and Jaden Ivey, right?
Yeah, just the muscle memory of playing with each other and having the real estate to make mistakes. Cade, this is why the summer will be very good for Cade Cunningham, going and playing with the USA team before they go off, when they go to Vegas, before they go off to the World Cup. That's going to be really big for him. And I think just him getting the nod is a big nod of respect.
100%. I think it shows that the basketball people know and believe what Cade can be, right?
Yeah.
And I think, like you said, it's important. This all comes down to him. And it's weird to put that kind of pressure. I think he knows that, though, because he's the one that you look at this roster and Duren and Ivy too, and Asar too, like he's super young, but I'm talking about guys that have played. But Cade's the one that like determines if this is going to be a slow burn or is this going to be like OKC quick turnaround. Like it like there's a world. I just don't think it's that out of the realm of possibilities for Detroit to do what OKC did last year. Would I bet money on that happening? No, I just don't think it's like far-fetched to believe that it could happen because I believe in Cade. People act like Cade wasn't the number one pick just 2 years ago. Sam Vecini, who covers does draft and prospect stuff, he still would take Cade number one. There's a bunch of people that still to this day would take Cade number one. So I don't know.
I think just being around stars. I think being around players who have to be great every day.
Pick their brain. That's fair.
I think when you have to bring it just to be at the level, not when you got to bring it to excel, when you got to bring it just to not be embarrassed every day, and you're playing in front of the big decision makers, you're playing in front of the Grant Hills of the world, you're playing in front of not the Olympic team, you know what I mean, because this is a different team than the Olympic team, but you're playing in front of some guys who hope to be in the Olympics. You hope to be where they are, that sort of thing.
Yeah, or exactly like Cade, I'm sure looks at Tyrese Halliburton and has great respect, but Cade should believe I should be better than Tyrese, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like I think they have a great relationship.
Do you want to go down you don't want to go down a rabbit hole of bad draft picks like you like hey, they took Killian Hayes over Tyrese Halliburton like that.
Yeah, I mean, we could do this all day.
Yes, we can do this.
Obviously that's Troy's, of all the drafting, that's the one that I'm sure he wishes he could have back, but he's made 3 first-round picks his first year, Cade year. 2 and he's made 7 to 8 first-round picks in 4 years already.
Yeah, he's a really good talent evaluator. He just happened to miss on Killian Hayes. Like, it's just
and I also get it if the idea was like the upside swing. It just sometimes when you swing for the fences, you ended up popping it out at the catcher.
I tell you, man, I don't say I go for the singles, but sometimes swinging big, you swing outside your league. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I agree. Like, you have to have some cojones to draft always to swing for the fences. And and I respect people who do that and can do that, and I think he's one of them. I would be afraid. Like, oh, Grady Dick, I know he's going to shoot 40% from three. Let me take him ninth. You know what I mean? Like, I'd be, I don't know. And it's also because I grew up in Michigan and have just watched the Pistons draft guys seventh. Like I said, that have been out of the league by 30.
You've got draft PTSD. That's what you have, James. You got, but and super last point, James. You talked about a little bit to start the podcast. Like you read the rundown and just said, I'm just going to screw this rundown up. Talking about the CBA and the fact that there's an element of haves and have-nots when you look at the Jaylen Brown, Supermax contract and how much money he's going to take up on the cap, left alone to, some of the, I won't say lesser players, lower tiered players who won't be able to make that type of money. It's going to facilitate a lot more movement. Mm-hmm. Do you think that the parity that we've never seen in the NBA, we've had 5 champions in the last 5 years, there's never been a stretch like that, I think, since maybe the 70s. That's not the modern NBA. And by modern, I mean post-merger, playoff expansion since 1984, 16 teams in the playoffs, 4 playoff rounds. That's not something that we've seen. We've seen dynastic teams, Lakers, Celtics, Bulls, Spurs, Lakers, then Pistons winning 3, Miami winning 3, whatever. Do you think this is going to be ultimately good for the league, or should they be leaning towards, hey, y'all, this dynasty stuff works. Did you see the ratings for Golden State, Boston a year ago? Like that sort of thing. Yeah.
That's a tough question because I think for basketball heads like us, it's the greatest thing that could happen. I love not knowing who could win the title every year because especially when you're in it like we are and you work, it's like we're just kind of wasting our time. Like, let's just get to these. Like for most of the late 2010s, like we knew it was going to be Warriors, insert X team here, right? Like, and that's cool because we love watching Steph. And that's the thing. That's another thing I think is maybe hidden in all this. Yes, the Warriors ratings were phenomenal. Those are Steph ratings.
Yeah,
right.
Those are Steph ratings. Yeah,
those are Steph ratings. The cream's going to rise to the top. When we get those Mount Rushmore type players, the ratings are going to be high. The teams are likely going to be good anyway. It's more, I think the general fan, especially in today's world, loves the players more than teams. But I do think that the ability for any team to get to the top breeds more individual stars, right? So OKC breaks through. Shea's a fashion guy. He has great captions. He plays a fun style. There's your next LaMelo Ball, right? So I think it's a great thing for the league because it'll bring light to all of the talent that the league has. And ultimately, yes, the Warriors ratings were off the charts, but it's primarily because Steph was must-see TV every single time he touched the floor. And I think they're obviously not to Steph's degree of must-see TV, but I mean, we could be talking about there's 30 teams in the league, like 26 might have must-see guys if you're like really into basketball and they just kind of need that push. It's almost like wrestling, right? You work your way up the middle card.
We got a wrestling reference. Okay, let's see where this is going.
No, I'm just saying you work your way up the middle card and then you get your shot and you take advantage. You
saying Shawn Michaels kicking Marty Jannetty through the glass? You probably don't remember that. You weren't even born.
I know. I'm a wrestling head. Yes, I didn't see it live, but I've seen it since. But exactly. Like it's. I think it's very similar to like nobody wanted to watch Hogan versus Macho Man for 10 years, right? You wanted to see Undertaker come in. You wanted to see Ric Flair.
You're going into the crazy.
Right,
turn this into a wrestling podcast. No, I get you. But I think, well, I agree with your point in general. I do think the average fan that the NBA is courting, they have to identify with the laundry more than the player. They have to identify, not necessarily Celtics, because Celtics are a different sort of brand and breed, and they've been around for 100 years and everything else. Right. But I think there has to be an element of familiarity with the laundry. Like if you're chasing the NFL doesn't matter who's there, and you're not going to be the NFL because of just the structure of the league. But there is a loyalty to the laundry compared to a loyalty to the player.
What do you mean by laundry? What does that mean? Like, what do you mean by that?
Like the franchise. Like the institution of the franchise means more than the player. like the stars are there, but you assimilate your stardom into the franchise, into winning. And I think that's sort of a fine line that the NBA fan is trying to figure out. That what do they want to see? Do they only want to see the stars, or do you want to see stars with great franchises, stars amplifying the franchise that you already know and you're familiar with? That's what we're honestly, I think, going to find out over the next few years when you go into a new broadcast deal, when you go into an in-season tournament, when you go into this era of old guys aging out, when you go into LeBron aging out, when you go into Steph going onto the back nine of his career, you're going to find out if the NBA is really good at marketing itself and marketing the franchise or marketing the player, and how I believe the fan will respond to that.
No, I think you're right. I'm very fascinated, actually, when you lay it out like that, to see how that goes. I have faith. I have faith in fans, which may be crazy, to recognize great basketball when you see it. Like, just don't understand how you could watch Denver and not just enjoy watching that, right? Like, and maybe I'm skewed. It's just hard for me to see how somebody who actually enjoys basketball did not enjoy watching what the Nuggets did. And I just think there's so many different styles of player that there's going to be something for everybody. But we'll see, right? I think the league and fans have been spoiled over the last 20 years, right? With LeBron, Steph, KD, Melo. I'll throw Melo in there. The end of T-Mac, Kobe, like some of the greatest this game has ever seen. It's just, I hope the fans realize that some of these guys you're watching now are going to bump some of those guys back.
That's a conversation for another day. James is always talking about these young guys moving these old guys out the way on somebody's all-time list, like these old guys wasn't doing work.
Can I ask you a question before we go? Who's the best point guard of all time?
Magic Johnson.
Then who's number two?
Number two?
Yep.
Isaiah Thomas.
Where's Steph?
That's what it is. Don't ask me a question and try to lead the witness. That's not how this works.
I'm just asking, where's Steph?
Steph is right there. It's the Holy Trinity, right? The Holy Trinity at the position is Magic at the head of the table because he's Irv, right? And then you got Isaiah and Steph, who play completely different ways and completely different eras with completely different responsibilities. You're not going to get me in an Isaiah versus Steph conversation. Like,
love Isaiah, great player.
You're not going to drag me down into this because I have takes, and I have takes.
I know. I'm trying to see how far you'll push it. The cameras aren't off right now.
The one thing I will say about Isaiah Thomas is this.
I think Isaiah's in the conversation, but I don't want to get that clear. Me and you have an inside joke that we're bringing public right now. Yeah.
Yes, that's all. James is a Steph loyalist.
Steph's the best point guard to ever play.
He's a member of Beige Rage. That's what, if you're watching us
and
on
we
YouTube,
have the same birthday, so
yeah, so
energy.
Did me and Jay-Z, but I ain't call him the greatest rapper ever. You know what I mean? Like, I got a little more common sense than that. The thing I'll say about Isaiah Thomas as we close is this. Every other superstar or great player of that time had teams built around their greatest talent. Isaiah Thomas was the only player of that time whose greatest talent and greatest gifts were suppressed for the greater good of his other players, for the teammates, until, man, we in Game 6 of the finals and I need 40 from you. That's what we have to do. Like, Steph was allowed to play Steph's game, and they were going to find players to augment Steph's game, as opposed to, hey, we're building a team, and Isaiah, you're going to be the leader, but you have to make sure everybody else gets theirs, and then when everybody else reaches their limit, we're going to call on you to be great when we're not asking you to be great for 82 games. That, my friends, is a provocateur, Mr. James Edwards III from The Athletic. If you are interested in following his takes on the Detroit Pistons, and this is a guy, y'all, that won the first date and tried to play some MF Doom to a woman before because he's a degenerate in that way.
I do have a Doom shirt on right now.
See what I'm saying? Only someone like a degenerate would actually be wearing a Doom shirt.
But I bagged her, though.
Is she still there?
We'll get dinner this week.
There we go. So subscribe to his podcast, The Bun and Cardigan Show. Again, James Edwards from The Athletic. Don't forget, guys, later this week, Dan will be hosting on an episode of No Cap Room because Jake will be on vacation. He might be like backpacking through Europe or something like that, or, being at Philadelphia Eagles camp, doing what he does. So Guys, thank you guys for checking back in on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Don't forget, producer John behind the glass, Evan and Ron doing on the videos. Thank you, gentlemen. And don't forget, we'll be back next week. Everybody, y'all hear the music. Be safe.